Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for Scorpios and Leos who are into each other. Either you're actually in a relationship with this person or you want to be. And I do these for entertainment purposes primarily, but also informational, just to let you know some of the qualities of each sign and how they mesh. But obviously you can't take this as the final word. Not that I think that most people would, but just to reiterate that, as I've done in prior videos. And the thing is about it that sometimes we are drawn to certain people, and maybe even certain signs. You might have a track record, if you're a Scorpio, of having more than one relationship with a Leo. And if they don't work out, you might be scratching your head and saying, what's going on? And not really paying attention to some of the differences that you have that make it difficult to sustain a relationship, but not impossible in every single case, because we're all individuals at the end of the day, right? So we can't go that far. But so anyway, I've put some things down here that I wanted to talk about. First of all, just talking about what each sign represents in terms of their makeup. We're talking about Scorpio being a water sign and Leo being a fire sign. And both of these signs are passionate, and in the case of Scorpio, emotional as well. I separate passion from emotion because I believe that emotion is personal, and dealing with somebody's past experiences. Passion can be more objective or detached, kind of like projected, taking your own personal emotions and projecting them onto a cause, onto some kind of a hobby, something that really makes the person light up inside. So if somebody has a passion for art, that would be an example. And they take their emotions and kind of channel it into this thing that can become more universal. And that's really the best sort of writing, the best sort of art, is something that is really coming from the person's essence, but it's being kind of broadened for a lot of people to enjoy it. And so the point is that while astrology will tell you that water and fire signs are, awkward, that they don't get along well, and of course, if you know much about astrology, you know that Scorpio and Leo form a square, so they, clash in that sense. That doesn't take into account the whole picture, and that's why I like to point out some of the things that these signs have in common. And so the reason that I think this is so important is because a Scorpio is supposed to get along famously with earth signs, and an example would be a Virgo. And yet the Virgo person might be kind of boring to the Scorpio, might be too dry. Earth can be dry, detached, rational instead of wildly romantic like a Leo, things like that. Which again, romanticism is a form of emotion. But again, it's more, even if it's directed towards a specific person, it's more of a concept than somebody who's reacting to something in their personal life. So for a Scorpio, Leo person might be more juicy, might be more alive to them emotionally. So the Scorpio wants to feel things very deeply, and even though they're supposed to get along with Earth, it might be in some cases, of course this will depend, but it might be in some cases a little bit too emotionally flat, and therefore they are not really that hooked into the relationship the way they would be with a Leo. So, and if I talk about from Leo's perspective, they're supposed to get along well with other fire signs and air signs, but let's talk about air. I mean, that might be, again, in a lot of ways, just like Earth, too detached, too analytical, too abstract, and not enough coming from the heart chakra, from the feeling place, where the Scorpio person may be much more what the Leo person is looking for. And Leo tends to be over the top. So Scorpio can certainly be over the top emotionally, and maybe that'll be something that the Leo person, maybe they fear and are fascinated by at the same time. So one of the things I put down is dynamic duo, power couple. Scorpio is ruled by two planets, Mars and Pluto. Pluto is associated with the power, and Mars is associated with that go-getter instinct within us, the ambition, the drive. So suffice it to say that Scorpio people tend to have this within themselves. I believe that Steve Jobs was a Scorpio, and I don't know about his life personally, but he does seem to exemplify somebody who scaled the heights of the career in the corporate world, for sure. And there are a million other examples of Scorpios like this, but we don't think of Scorpios in the same way we do Leo, about grabbing the brass ring. I think Leo is like a stealth type of a person in this regard. And it's almost by any means necessary, because I could see a Leo person, I'm sorry, did I say Leo? A Scorpio person I could see being more, being even like happy to be the kingpin of a criminal enterprise if they're not expressing their scorpionic traits at the highest level, because Pluto is the god of the underworld, and so Scorpio people can be drawn to the seedy side of life, and this can involve the underground economy, if you will, and things of that nature that are not sanctioned occupations, even like prostitution and things like that, similar types of things. Not, I'm talking about certain Scorpios, and I would even say the more imbalanced ones, because while Scorpio may be intrigued by the seedy side of life, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to volunteer for it. It's kind of risky. It's not that glamorous, to say the least. It can be dangerous to live that sort of lifestyle. So either the Scorpio person is trying to exorcise some demons inside of themselves. I'm talking about metaphorical demons, like their upbringing, by getting involved in something like that. It doesn't mean that they have to do that. This will be if they're coming from a background that makes them feel like they are attracted to that initially. So, for instance, if a woman becomes a stripper or a prostitute, and then she goes into a so-called straight profession, well, that's all relative, isn't it? Because sometimes things are illegal and then they become legal, and then all of a sudden it's okay. And, we just forgot all these years when people were jailed for doing the very same thing. So that's why we have to transcend those concepts. But they can still be kind of dark professions regardless, even if they're legal. And this is something that Scorpio just is attracted to. Leo, I think, is more interested in the very open and obvious way of gaining recognition, success. I think of the Six of Wands in the tarot, which is about recognition and kudos and getting one's praise for their talents and things like that. But Scorpio values people with power and those with ambition. And I think I'm adding that because I think that's an extension, as you're rising up in your status in life, materially speaking, I would say, you have to have the drive to get that power. So Scorpio is all about that. And but at the same time, I could see that a Scorpio person sacrificing for the Leo and doing it. I had to redo this video because of tech issues I'm having. And I gave the example of somebody who is not a Scorpio, but a famous person, Stevie Nicks, the singer from Fleetwood Mac, who before she was part of Fleetwood Mac was with Lindsey Buckingham, who was the guitarist. And, one of Stevie's famous songs is Edge of 17, and that is about Lindsey and, her relationship with him. So she was a waitress while he was doing his music and trying to get ahead. You might say, well, that's nice, but what does that have to do with anything? Well, hello, Stevie was not just some kind of like a hash slinger. She was also a musician herself, or a singer, I will say, an artist. And she, had every right to maybe demand that he, become a waiter or something like that. But that's, with the older generations, that's just how it goes. This is why I say if you're over the age of 40 and listening to this, you probably, and heterosexual, because I'm looking at it from the male-female dynamic perspective, then the roles are going to be, I think, more traditional for you in your relationships. And I always say that it's better for the woman to be the feminine sign, so the woman to be the Scorpio and the male to be the Leo. But with the younger generation, all bets are off, because I've seen the opposite happening, where the woman is more of the aggressor and in charge of the relationship, so to speak. So it doesn't really translate that way. But if you're, probably over 40 or so, then I think it helps in general for the woman to be the water sign and the male to be the fire sign. However, here's a twist with Scorpio. I think a male Scorpio has enough confidence and a strong enough ego to handle a strong Leo woman who is successful, large, and in charge of her life. So that is the one exception I would make for all the water sign males. I tend to see them as traditional males, men's men, macho guys. But even having said that, I think that Scorpio men can be a lot more secure within themselves to handle a Leo woman. Because usually Leo women can be a bit much for a man to handle. And I say this as a Sagittarius woman who's also a fire sign, masculine sign. Fire sign women are not little women who, walk 8 paces behind their men. So we tend to be more one of the boys. And we may even prefer male company. So some women have male friends and they need that man to be okay with that. and be secure enough within himself. So there's something to think about. I didn't write that down or type it out, but how many of you Scorpio men are not jealous enough or suspicious enough, as Scorpios tend to be, that you would that you would be okay with your female Leo counterpart to have dinner with another man who happens to be her friend, a platonic friend. Okay, so that's one thing. The power issue is not threatening to either party, and both will support the other in becoming more powerful. So that can be good. Other signs might not do that the way that each one needs them to. I talked about that each of you are passionate. You know what I wrote? I wrote smoldering sex. And this is for two reasons. First of all, not fixed signs, but signs that square one another apparently are tend to be physically attracted to one another, while they can clash in general. And the clashing comes because you're seeing the world in a different way. Even though you're both fixed signs, you see things in a different way, and therefore it is hard to get on common ground. I'm generalizing that because I'm trying to show you that you do have common ground, but there still may be clashes. And the challenge with fixed signs is the ability to be flexible, because you are quite rigid, stubborn. I put stubborn as F, because fixed signs can, when they want something to go their way, they dig in their heels. So if you have two people digging in their heels, it's a roadblock. And so what can that say of the relationship? Does it stand a chance? Yes, it does, if the people are willing to alter their tendencies in this area. And I put moths to a flame. And this is going along with the smoldering sex, this deep attraction, physical attraction, that may or may not translate to other areas of life. And sometimes you can have two people and they have this amazing physical connection, but they have a horrible relationship overall, a very toxic relationship. And, these kinds of things can, I was going to say something, and I thought, oh, I shouldn't say this because this is kind of, I think I'm not going to say it, because I don't want to bring anything into this reading that is not of a positive nature. But people have to look at relationships as, holistic things, and so just having a good sexual connection with somebody isn't enough. I think Scorpios will be nodding their heads hearing this. Leos, I believe, are more casual about sex. And this is interesting because both of your signs rule houses that are connected to sex. The fifth house is connected to casual sex. Now, one reason that bothers me is because it's also the house of conceiving children. So I don't like, that makes no sense to me. Casual sex should never be connected to bringing life into this world. But it is, it's the house of pleasure. This is why. And maybe God gave us that pleasure so we would keep the species alive. And Scorpio rules the 8th house of magical or spiritual sex. And Scorpios have written to me and said, yes, I'm celibate, that they do not take sex lightly, even though they're associated with it. So I've kind of written off Scorpio when it comes to sex, even though they rule a house connected to it. I really feel that Leos tend to be horn dogs. So this can be, but Scorpios do, take sex seriously. So Leo could be the one that really, what's the phrase, blows their mind, or no, it's like lights up their world, something like that. And yet, if the Scorpio person doesn't, keep their bearings, they may realize when it's too late that the Leo person wasn't really that into the relationship emotionally. They were just, passing through. So that moth to a flame thing has a limited, can have an expiration date or a limited value, but it still is present, and that's why I'm bringing it up. So let's talk about some of the areas that they may clash. I've already talked about being stubborn, so unyielding to each other's needs and wants. You got to. You can't always have your own way. Leo may be too independent for the Scorpio. Scorpio's a feminine sign. The earth and water, as I said, are feminine. So they tend to be more domestically oriented, homebodies, into the family life. Leo's fire signs tend to be more adventurous, outdoorsy. I mean, when I say outdoorsy, I mean out of the house. Even if they have a family, they may want to take their family on travel. Expansion is the name of the game with Leo. Scorpio is very private, secretive. Leo is an open book. So a Scorpio person doesn't tend to be a social, I was going to say sociable, but that sounds like they're just grumpy all the time. But you know what I mean, a social butterfly. Unless they have, a strong Libra presence, because Libra, they could have inner planets in Libra, like Venus in Libra and or Mars in Libra, that make them more sociable, having those tendencies. And also the rising sign has to be taken into account, because that is something that they want to promote. Although if they're past the age of 30, they may not really value that area anymore. So if they have an air sign or a fire sign ascendant in their earlier adulthood years, they may resemble that more than the Scorpio. And the Scorpio part might be the deceptive, the rising sign might be the deceptive packaging that really harbors this intense Scorpio in the package of a lighthearted Sagittarian rising sign, or a Libra rising, or a Gemini rising. The moon sign also we have to take into consideration, because that is the person's emotional nature. If somebody has an air sign as their moon sign and their sun is in Scorpio, they may kind of prefer to be emotionally detached, and therefore kind of be diffused with all these relationships as an excuse to not be attached. So that can definitely modify a Scorpio, but in general, a Leo person is going to be much more extroverted, and the Leo wants to be the center of attention. The more imbalanced the Leo person is, the more that it becomes, pathological might be an extreme case, but, that narcissism that I think some people unfairly attach to all Leo people, but that narcissism can come into full bloom with a very imbalanced Leo. And the Scorpio person isn't going to have it, because Scorpios don't bow to anybody. They may respect somebody who deserves respect, but they don't Scorpio people are strong in their own right, and they're not going to be impressed by that kind of display. The Scorpio person can be possessive, suspicious, and Leos are not going to like that, and also vengeful. Leos are fire signs, they're warm. Scorpios to me are kind of cold-blooded. I'm not bashing Scorpios. I actually have had some nice experiences with Scorpios. You have to take the good with the bad, right? But in my estimation, I don't think that they have the same warmth as a Leo person. And Leo being a fire sign, there's an innocence, there's kind of a guilelessness. Scorpio is like the master chess player. So there's always like this Machiavellian tendency within Scorpios of that manipulation, that kind of, looking at people as pawns on a chessboard. Again, the more imbalanced Scorpios do this. And the vengefulness, the desire for revenge is not going to be present that strongly in all Scorpios, although Pluto is connected to the Judgment card, I think, in the tarot, and it's that idea of karmic justice. And that feeling of, especially if the Scorpio person has Mars in Libra or the Moon in Libra, and that strong sense of fairness, and that was unfair what you did, and I'm going to be the I'm going to be the judge and jury, and I'm going to do something about it. And so Scorpio has problems sometimes with lack of forgiveness. And I think Leos will kind of look down on that tendency as, pettiness or, just not very nice behavior. And that may not sit well with a Leo person, make them a little bit leery of the Scorpio. The possessiveness, the suspiciousness. Nobody likes to be given the third degree, and especially if they haven't done anything wrong. And the Scorpio person, especially if they have been hurt in the past, has trust issues. Scorpio in general, their default position is there's more to the story than meets the eye. And so they're always like kind of suspicious. And this can be taken to the extreme, obviously, where the person is just never satisfied with what answer they get. And then they start snooping, and they're just a turnoff to a healthy person. In terms of how they handle anger, Scorpio broods generally. Now, as I stated, one of the rulers of Scorpio is Mars, and Mars is the god of war and also connects to our anger, how we deal with anger. But because Scorpio is a secretive sign and there's a kind of like a pride with Scorpios about not letting people know how they feel, or if they've been hurt, like trying to present themselves as invulnerable. And this is probably, again, because they despise weakness. They always identify with power and powerful people. And so a Leo person is protective of those who are kind of the underdogs in life. That's kind of that passionate place that the Leo is coming from, of like trying to be the champion of human rights. And that's just, I'm generalizing of all fire signs. The idealism is kind of where I was going with that. And I think that Leos are very positive, and Scorpios can be kind of cynical. And so getting back, so a Leo person may feel like kind of like a negative impact from hanging out with the imbalanced Scorpio, or even like a regular Scorpio person who sees kind of like the dark side of life. I don't even mean just depressing, but just the shadow. And the shadow is part of life. So we can't say, oh, that's bad. We can only have the, shiny, happy side. And we do have to look at both. But getting back to the anger expression, Leo can rage while Scorpio is brooding and plotting their revenge. And so the Scorpio person might not like it if the Leo is, particularly the imbalanced type, that is like the petty tyrant, that is the, using anger as a manipulative tool, as a tool of intimidation, where the Scorpio uses their, their kind of, I was going to say their voodoo, whatever you want to say, on people that they feel have wronged them. And I wonder if there are more witches born under the sign of Scorpio than other signs. I don't know. But that sounds like, and I'm talking about the black magic in particular, not just pagans and things like that. But, well, that took a dark turn. But anyway, that's what I have for you. I hope that some of you are still listening. It is long, but in any case, this is the kind of thing that I do when I do personal readings. So if you are in a relationship, for instance, I don't do synastry charts where I put one chart on top of the other. I really just do it organically, looking at it side by side, just each person. It's more intuitive for me that way. But you can check me out. I'm at rainamoonastrology.com. The link is below. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.